Okay, so I want to start out by going through programming, and I have this example template up. I believe it should be in your shared folder. So what we're looking at right here is 1 week of training. Okay. Now, each week of training is comprised of individual training units. So in this case, a single day is an individual training unit. Okay, these are all individual training units. The term for programming, when you're putting it together, so we have an individual training unit, a collection of individual training units, so this whole entire week, is called a microcycle. Now, if I was going to make more weeks, so in this case, let's just relabel this week 1, and then if you were going to end up making a week 2, and we just throw that program in here, and then if we made a week 3, these 3 weeks would be called a mesocycle. So a mesocycle is just a collection of microcycles or a collection of weeks. Okay? So when we talk about programming, that really refers to what is going into the structure right here. So this is programming. What's our day look like? And when we do that, we need to consider individualization. And that means what exercises fit the person. When you think specificity, what variables, and we can even just say what variables, so reps, weight, specific exercises fit the goal, okay? And we're not even considering concepts like progressive overload right now. So let's just say I'm going to write a program. Let's say I'm an experienced weightlifter. Or actually, let's say I'm a novice. Let's say I'm a novice, but I have good technique on everything. So I'm a novice. So what's that going to mean? I'm probably going to end up doing a full body routine. And I know that because I'm doing a full body routine, or I'm planning out a full body routine, each day should probably have a hinge, a squat, that's not how you spell squat, a push, a pull, and then perhaps some core exercises and single joint exercises. Now, I know that if I'm putting together this program and all of these things or some of these things are going to be in the program, it's okay if you don't hit everything. Maybe one day I do more of a squat and the next day I do more of a hinge. But if I know that that's going into a program, I need to think what goes first. Okay, so that's compound exercises with high technical demand, compound exercises with less technical demand, and then we can think single joint exercises. So let's say that I wanted to do a full body routine. I could say, and again, I'm saying that I have good techniques, so I'm going to say A1. The A's are things that I'd like you to include in your program, and you'll see what I mean by that. A1, let's say dumbbell Romanian deadlift. And then my A2, which means it's a superset, which means they're paired together. And my A2, let's say that I want it to be a push up off bench. Okay. Dumbbell Romanian deadlift. So right now I'll write down 3x12 at, and let's just say 30 pounds. And then let's just say 3x12 at body weight. BW just means body weight. And so what I could do right here is say 60 seconds. So that means that I'm going to go a set of 12, move right into a set of 12 of push-ups, rest 60 seconds, set of 12, rest 60 seconds, set of 12, rest 60 seconds, then move on. So I'd say moving on to my B's. Okay, so let's just say I want to do a goblet squat. Okay, and then B2, let's just say that I want to do a seated cable row. Okay, so let's just say 3 by 12 at 20, 3 by 12 at, let's just call that 30 on the stack. Okay, so now I want to move on to C1. So what haven't I done yet? So I've done push, but I haven't done a push in a vertical direction. So maybe I want to say high incline press, C2, and then maybe I might want to start doing some single joint stuff, so things that are a little bit less challenging. So maybe I want to pair that with a hammer curl. Let's just say I want to do 3 by 12 at 20, 3 by 12 at 8. Okay, so I've just designed a single training day. Okay. Now, if I'm a novice, I might even be doing less. This might actually be maybe 2 sets instead of 3. Okay. So now let's say that I want to pull some variations on this because I'm still doing full body. So I'm not going to do the same exact exercises, but I'm going to just pull them over so that you can see any modifications that might make sense. So if we have dumbbell Romanian deadlift, let's just change that to dumbbell deadlift. And then let's change push-up to, let's call that like a band-assisted push-up. And why don't we change goblet squat over to a dumbbell lunge. And let's change seated cable row. And let's change that over to chest supported row. High incline press, let's change that to a overhead press. Let's change this to a preacher curl. Okay. Then I could say, okay, I'm probably going to go a little bit more than I would at my Romanian deadlift. Let's just say 3 by 12 at like green band assisted, 3 by 8 per foot at 15, 3 by 12 at 20, 15. And all of these numbers would be completely based on what that person's capability is, okay? Which you would know your own capability. And if you're not sure, you don't have to stick with that weight the entire time that you're actually putting a routine together, okay? So this would be just how, if I was a novice, maybe I'm just doing 2 days of strength training. So let's do that. So a couple options if we're talking about moving from week 1 to week 2 to week 3. So is there anything that we change? Sure, there's a lot of things that you could do differently, but let's move this over to here and do this. So one of the simpler options is to just say, delete this, is to just say for 3 weeks, I'm just going to do the same thing. So that would be one option that you could do. All right, I'm just doing the same exact thing. I'm going to do that for 3 weeks. All right. Another option would be is I could vary the repetitions on a week-to-week basis. So what I could do is if I was doing 12s, now I change this to, let's just say I want to do 3 by 10. Whoops. Let's say I want to do 3 by 10 because it was 30 pounds. Now I can make it 35 pounds. I can make it a little bit heavier. Push up off bench press. Let's just say I want to make that 3 by 10. I could say right here, reduce height of bench. Goblet squat, I could say 3 by 10. I could do this at 25. So the reason why I'm changing the weight is because I'm dropping the reps. So if I wanted to make this by 10, I can make that heavier. Same here. So that's just an example of what I'm not going to do it on this day, but I'll show you a different thing that you can do. And if I went to week 3, I would just make this 8 or 15. So I'd be varying the reps. So that's one thing I can do. Okay, what's another thing that I could do? I could see if I could make it a little bit more challenging in terms of weight on a week-to-week basis. So I'll use day 2 for an example. So as I move over to day 2, I might be able to see, I might want to see, okay, well, let's see if we can do 45 pounds. Let's see if we can do light or red band. So red's a little bit less than the green. Okay, and then let's see if I can go 20 right here. Let's see if I can go 25, 20, 10, and then on my 3rd week, maybe I see, okay, so what did I do before? I'm going to pull what I just did right here. And let's see if I can do this. Presumably giving less assistance. And then if I just called that my single cycle. So if you decide to go with that route where you're increasing the weight on a week-to-week basis, you're not going to be able to do that indefinitely. So what you would have to eventually do is, if I'm going up in weight, so let's just take the dumbbell deadlift, for example. I went 40, 45, and then I went to 50. You're not going to be able to continuously go 55, 60, 65, 70, 75, 80. Eventually, you're going to hit a plateau. You're not going to be able to continue to increase that weight. So if we call this, we're going to call this mesocycle 1, week 1, mesocycle 1, week 2, mesocycle 1, week 3. Let's just say that I kept the load, so I did 40, 50, 60. Okay, and now if I'm moving on to, let's just say mesocycle 2, week 1, which would be, I'm moving into technically week 4. So in this case, maybe I drop it down to 45. Oh, I'm sorry, I messed that up. That should have been 45, 50. So let's say I drop that back to 45. So I drop the load, and then I go 50, and then I go 55. So technically, every 3 weeks, I am increasing the weight that I'm actually doing. So I might have gone a little bit too far in explaining things, but when you're putting together your program, this is what you need to consider. What am I? Am I a novice? Am I more advanced? Or am I an intermediate? That's going to dictate what kind of training split you do. What kind of training split you do is going to dictate, along with your capabilities and goals, is going to dictate which exercises you pick within those categories. Okay? So the best way to get better at programming is to continue to try to program. I'll post this little review up as well, so please make sure you go over it. It's really, and just follow that outline that I have on Blackboard too. Your capabilities dictate what exercises you pick. Your specific goal dictates repetitions as well as exercise. So what you can do, and then what helps to fit your goal should fit right here. Your exercises should go in a specific order. So if I took this, let's just say I did a day 3. And I delete all these. Let's just say I want like A1, skull crusher, A2, dumbbell, fly, A3, hammer curl, and then I wanted to go to something like bench press, and then I wanted to go to something like chin up. Well, these things right here are all going to get in the way of my success. They're going to have detrimental fatigue effects on these exercises right here. So we would want to completely flip that script. So that wouldn't be the correct order of an exercise. Bench press and chin-ups, that should be what goes first. All right. Are there any questions on that? So I'm going to close out that example sheet, and I'm going to pull up the warm-up sheet that I have for us. Okay. So we're going to do an introduction to flexibility and warm-ups, and then we're going to actually go through all of this stuff, okay? So the objectives for the day, number one is just cover this lecture. I don't think that that's going to take too much time. We'll go over some static stretches. We'll provide examples of mobility exercises. We'll give a bunch of examples of dynamic warm-ups, and then we're actually going to do a yoga class. So after the break, make sure you have appropriate attire for movement. So we'll start out by talking about flexibility and range of motion. So flexibility training through the use of different forms of stretching aims to increase the range of motion around a joint. So our goal with flexibility is to increase range of motion. To some extent, that is a goal of your warm-up too, is to improve temporary range of motion. So flexibility is the degree of movement that occurs at a joint, and this is called range of motion or ROM. You'll often see ROM. The range of motion of a particular joint is going to be determined by connective tissue structure, activity level, age, and sex. So you'll see people that are older generally have less range of motion. Women also tend to have more range of motion than men. And each range of motion is specific to each joint's anatomy and the movements required at that joint. So the shoulder joint, for example, is a joint that should have a lot of range of motion. Again, it moves in all these different planes. Flexibility is going to be a measure of range of motion, and it has static and dynamic components. So static flexibility is the range of possible movement about a joint and its surrounding muscles during passive movement. So passive movement would be like if someone was stretching you. So static flexibility requires no voluntary muscle activity. An external force such as gravity, a partner, or a machine provides the force for a stretch. So if anyone's ever stretched you, that's static flexibility. And then you have dynamic flexibility, which refers to the available range of motion during active movements and therefore requires voluntary muscular actions. So if we're comparing the difference between dynamic flexibility and static flexibility, that gap in between where your body can actually go and where you can control where it can go is kind of like a range for injury. So what I mean by that is if you took your pointer finger and you pointed it up as high as you could voluntarily, you're only going to get so far. But if you took your other hand and you pushed it back even further, you can actually push your finger back further. So that would be like more of like, what's my static flexibility? What's the range of motion there? So the question would be, where am I likely to hurt my finger? It's going to be where I can't control it. Where it can go, but it can't go with control. All right, so stretching during warm-up. So this would be, how are we going to start to think about how are we going to incorporate this stuff into a warm-up, and if we should as well. So the main types of stretching are static, dynamic, and what's called proprioceptive neuromuscular facilitation. Don't worry about the last one. We can't actually do it because we're not in person with each other. This one actually requires a partner. So static stretching has long been used in a warm-up with the aim of enhancing performance, but recent reviews of the literature surrounding the role of static stretching question this practice. There is little, if any, evidence that stretching pre or post participation prevents injury or also a subsequent muscle soreness. So something that I've seen in the past is a lot of people do static stretching in this class. When I say I want you to design a warm-up, a lot of them do static stretching prior to that. In my opinion, that's fine. It's fine if you want to do a little bit of static stretching before you do a warm-up, but I wouldn't overstretch, and I would also make sure we include the next thing that we're going to be talking about, which is a dynamic warm-up. we can kind of think dynamic stretching. So dynamic stretching is more functionally based in training. We train specific movements to prepare for whatever we're going to do, so for the activity. And it doesn't seem to elicit the same performance reduction effects as static stretching, but has been shown to improve subsequent running performance. This is what we'll spend a lot of time actually working on, is dynamic stretching. I'll be giving you examples of dynamic warm-ups. So given these findings, the use of static and PNF stretching in warm-up needs to be questioned. Based on current evidence, dynamic stretching is the preferred option for stretching during an actual warm-up. Dynamic stretching has also been called mobility drills. These place an emphasis on the movement requirements of the sport or activity rather than on stretching individual muscles. So if you're stretching, oftentimes you say, okay, I'm stretching my quadriceps or I'm stretching my calves. Dynamic warm-up doesn't really do that. It's more full body. This type of exercise can closely duplicate the movement requirements of if you're doing a sport or of an activity. For example, if you did like a walking knee lift, that actually mimics the mechanics of sprinting. So you can essentially think of dynamic stretching as actively moving a joint through its range of motion that's going to be required for in a sport or in the exercises that you're going to actually do. In dynamic stretching, unlike static stretching, the muscle doesn't relax during the stretch, so you're not relaxed, but instead is active in the range of the motion. And this is also more specific to movements that occur in a sport. So if we're talking about weightlifting, you're never going to be relaxed when you're weightlifting. So unlike that's a major difference from static stretching. Now, a warm-up, what's the purpose of a warm-up? A warm-up is designed to prepare the individual for training or competition and can improve subsequent performance and also reduce the risk of injury. And warm-up should be incorporated into every program design. A well-designed warm-up should do the following. It should increase muscle temperature, should improve blood circulation, should also provide an opportunity for skill rehearsal. So what I mean by that is if I was doing squats that day, back squats, my warm-up should probably include body weight squats. So we try to keep the warm-up specific to what we're going to do. Now, the effects of warm-up can have the following positive impacts on performance. Number one, it's going to be faster muscle contraction and relaxation of both agonist and antagonist muscles. So agonist muscles, again, are the muscles that are doing the work. Antagonist muscles are the ones that are opposing the work. We have improvements in the rate of force development and also reaction time. There's improvements in muscular strength and power. Lower blood resistance in the muscles and increased blood flow to the active muscles. So those are some of the benefits of warm-up. Now, warm-ups are going to have two components, a general warm-up and then also a specific warm-up. Now, a general warm-up, this is going to consist of 5 to 10 minutes of low-intensity activities. That could be, for example, jogging, cycling, maybe you're getting on an elliptical or something like that for 5 to 10 minutes. It should not be exhausting. The aim is to increase heart rate, blood flow, deep muscle temperature, and also respiration rate. The specific warm-up is going to be different. This period incorporates movements similar to the movements that are going to actually be utilized in the workout, or if you're an athlete in the actual sport that they're doing. This one's a little bit longer, 8 to 12 minutes of more dynamic stretching that focuses on movements that work through the range of motion required for the sport. And again, if you're not doing a sport, whatever's required for the activity that you are about to do or that the client that you're working with is about to do. In terms of fatigability, warm-up should not make you feel fatigued. Warm-up should progress gradually and then provide sufficient intensity to increase muscle and core temperature without causing fatigue or reducing energy stores. All right, so here's the question. I'm going to give you this. This is a single day program. So type in the box, what's the focus of my program based on this day? Type it in. What's the focus? What is my focus for the day? Go ahead, type it in. Yep. So I'm training my lower body. So I want you to tell me of these two options for a specific warm up, which one would you pick based on what I'm going to train that day? Option one or option two? Yep. So we're going to be picking option one because that is specific to the workout that I'm going to be doing. If I picked option two, shoulder taps, push ups, arm hugs, that's all warming up my upper body, but I'm not doing an upper body workout. This workout right here, bodyweight squats, lunges, that's actually going to include some of the things that we're doing in the program. All right, so good work. So this is a brief overview. What I'm going to do right now is I'm going to send you the comprehension quiz for warm-ups. You're going to fill it out, and then we are going to cover it. 3 questions. Go ahead. I just typed it into the text box. Please take the quiz. We will discuss. All right. So why don't you take 5 minutes to do that quiz? All right. You probably don't need 5 minutes. Why don't you take 3 minutes to do the quiz? Go ahead.